So Corestate, as the most that I see here know obviously Corestate. Corestate is one of the leading real estate asset management business in Europe. We have seen strong growth throughout the last 3 years and now manage roughly 26 up to 28 billion with our most recent acquisition of value for our clients. Myself, I'm joined the company 2.5 years ago. Now I'm the CEO of the company. And obviously, the ESG comprehensive strategy is an important part of our overall strategy. We started this roughly a year ago, and we come to the details later.
My name is Bärbel Schomberg. I've been in the real estate industry, I have to admit, for 40 years now. I used to be managing director of many open-ended funds like Conrads, Dresdner Bank, Aberdeen Asset Management and Allianz Real Estate, and not to forget SEB. Long time ago, ESG was not a topic at all, but for 10 years for now, I'm Deputy President of the German Property Federation, and in this role we do a lot for ESG for our members. Since last year I'm managing director of a new founded company together with my two sons, Philip Schomberg and Dr. Tim Schomberg, which is called Kingstone Investment Management, and we are based in Munich.
Sara Anzinger, I'm Senior VP of Capital Markets for Measurabl. Measurabl is a California-based software company. We're venture capital backed and have been around about 6 years. And what we do is we provide environmental data management platform specifically for commercial real estate owners. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here. We've had about 40% of our growth over the past year come from Europe with clients like Corestate, and we're excited to continue growing here. Most of my experience has been in commercial real estate finance, and I pivoted to sustainability about 5 years ago, started working for GRESB, most recently Fitch Ratings, and I've only been on board for about a month at Measurabl, but I'm really excited about the next steps.
My name is Christiane Conrads. I'm a German qualified real estate lawyer at PwC Legal, and I run the German desk in London at PwC. I'm a member of the German Real Estate Legal Practice Group and focusing on real estate transactions and on ESG in the built environment. And there I developed the concept of our green property and facility management together with some other market participants like Cushman & Wakefield and Visag in 2013 and 14. And this was complemented by a green lease concept in 2015 together with Generali and Union Investment.
Great, thank you. I mean, we've all discussed here that ESG is becoming a much bigger part of it. What do you think have been the most noticeable changes that you've seen, particularly for Corestate and also for the market, Lars?
Well, it's a clear demand from our clients. So that means not only the clients, but also the various stakeholders we have. If it's employees and the wider society, what you see, what is going out there on the streets currently with the issues of environmental, social, but also governance, that's tremendous. And given that we are a larger contributor when it comes to CO2 emissions in the global world, I think 30% are coming from the real estate side. Whoever is acting in this industry, I think, is very good advice to take this topic very seriously. So there are two things. The one is, do you want to contribute there as a company as part of a sustainable strategy? And the other is that it's in the German sense of Miss Merkel, alternative-less. So that means the clients have already incorporated in their investment committee decisions that they only will invest along asset management business that have a publicly transparent and measurable ESG strategy. So therefore we have already some months ago now published, I think as one of the first in this industry, at least as one of the few, very quantitative data how we will impact the environment in our portfolio. So in clear words, how do we reduce CO2 emissions, how do we increase energy efficiency, how do we reduce water consumption, for instance.
And just coming to you, Bärbel. I mean, obviously, Lars mentioned there having a comprehensive ESG strategy. You mentioned that also as an industry body, you've been working towards that. I mean, where do you think the main pressure is coming from and should be coming from? And what role do you play within that, I suppose, as an influential association here for real estate in Germany?
So, first of all, the main pressure nowadays is coming from the investors, from the institutional investors. They have to have sustainable financing in place, and due to regulations from Brussels, we have more and more the demand for sustainable investments. And that is definitely the key for all those real estate companies who do investments for institutional clients. As a body, as the German Property Federation, we started already in 2011 to develop a codice for sustainability. And this is not only sustainable investments and ecological issues, it's also about social issues, it's about diversity, it's about human beings' well-being, and that is really a very comprehensive topic we have been working on since 2011, and we will never finish, to my point of view.
And interestingly, one of the topics in one of the other discussions we had about was how incredibly important it is for there to be a positive message in terms of there are rewards for it. It's not just about regulation, it's not just about demand, but actually there's a return. Sara, just in terms of Measurabl, are there ways of, or Christiane, are there ways of being able to measure the impact of a more sustainable policy in general for an investor?
Yeah, so maybe I can just start by backing up a little and talking about why Measurabl was created. And we're really here to try and help real estate owners collect data, analyze it, and report it to their stakeholders, and make that process smoother and easier. So our CEO and founder was head of sustainability for CBRE and knew firsthand how burdensome that process could be, especially as you're trying to do it manually through many different spreadsheets. And I would say that's the number one concern we hear from investors here as well, is the challenge of environmental data collection on buildings. So Measurabl created a platform that essentially really helps automate that process. We have something called Utility Sync, where we're able to pull utility data, water, waste, energy consumption, and carbon directly from utility providers. And this makes for an automated, streamlined process that pulls it into a centralized repository, where then you, as investors and owners, have the ability to draw actionable insights. So we also have recently developed something called Targets, which allows you to track the performance of your assets or your portfolios based on your own internal targets, or maybe what you want to align with the Paris Agreement goals. So increasingly, there are ways through technology and innovation to be able to more easily collect this data, analyze it, and use it for your own benefit. And while I think this has been an investor-driven type initiative for many years, increasingly regulation is pushing this. I think property owners are also realizing that it not only can reduce operating expenses, there's a lot of upside in terms of revenue generation that can be realized as well. You know, the academic literature has shown for quite some time that higher occupancy rates, higher effective rental rates, more stability in terms of defense against systemic risk in downturns is possible. And I think what's also interesting, millennials coming up, tenants are demanding green and sustainable buildings more so as well. I think that things will continue to push forward on this track, and hopefully technology will continue to help all of us manage it better.
And I know, Christiane, that you've been involved in the green lease side quite a lot. From your perspective, how is that? I mean, it's one of the areas where you can engage, I suppose, with the wider real estate community and try to create a positive story around it, and also create positive outcomes in terms of those sort of lease products. What's driving that, and is that beginning to have an effect in terms of tenants and the investors, in terms of getting more revenue, getting more outperformance, so that there's a positive win-win for everybody?
Yes, finally the day has come that also more and more tenants are requesting green clauses in lease agreements. And so we have done a lot of education on what green lease agreements actually mean. So, and they only work if it's a collaboration with the tenants, if tenants are being approached in a positive way. It's about providing high quality real estate products and services to the tenants, and really start the discussion with him and collaborate. And in return, what we see right now, you just mentioned the data exchange. So in Germany, many real estate, it's just a big problem for all the big real estate investors to get sufficient data on the energy consumption of the overall building, because the tenants, they conclude the agreements with the utility companies themselves, and the landlords never see the energy data for the tenant areas. So what we find now, so like a couple of years ago, many tenants really refused to hand over this data, to exchange this data, and now it's more and more easy to get these clauses agreed in the lease agreements. And last week it was the first time that not only the tenants agreed to provide the energy consumption data to the landlord, but also give some more information also on diversity, and so we are getting there.
Okay, good. I wanted to just pick up with you. I mean, you mentioned that the policy in terms of Corestate. How do you see the links between obviously E, S, and G, and why is that such a big focus for Corestate now?
Well, it is a big focus for Corestate since more than a year, but we have invested into processes, into IT, into people we have lined up with Measurabl, because the question is, how do you really measure your emissions that you produce in your portfolio? So there's a lot to do, and I can only recommend for everybody who is in this industry to start with this rather sooner than later. It's a comprehensive strategy. It's not only the environment, it's also the social, it's also the governance. So we have, for instance, implemented in our comprehensive ESG strategy 12 clear targets, quantitative and qualitative. And these are for every aspect of the strategy, E, S, and G. You can find them here in our ESG report, so they are well spread over these four. And I'm a strong believer that you can only run a company of a certain size if you have this comprehensive strategy. I give you one example. When we are staying here with three ladies, we have in the company more than 50% women, but in the top management or in the management, we are around 26%. So per definition, we need to work on that, because otherwise we exclude, obviously, half of the population. And I'm coming back to the war of talents, HR recruitment processes. And for this, you need to have a process that is implemented in this particular case in your HR policy. This is nothing you do just like this. So you really need your whole management team to focus on this. Or we have, when it comes to the governance, we have for the whole 730 people, they do compliance training every year. This is something you need the IT, you need a process, you need to implement. So, and you can only achieve this if the whole company is committed to do so. But the wider stakeholder, the wider society also demands for that. And I'm very serious or very convinced that this pressure will be stronger and stronger the coming years. So therefore we are well prepared to act like this.
Good. And Bärbel, in terms of the regulatory side, obviously some of that is we've mentioned that some of that will come from Brussels. You've also got the occupiers as millennials come through demanding more of this from a tenant perspective. But is there a role there for the industry to self-regulate and begin to drive these things themselves?
That is what our body, what the German Property Federation is definitely aiming at with all these issues. We are very much in favor of self-regulation because we feel that we have to be ahead of the curve and not just following regulation. And that is why, as I mentioned, since 2011 we are working on different aspects like also green lease, sustainable leadership in companies, benchmarking. We are working on the valuation issue, which I have to admit is not that far as I personally and most of our colleagues would like it to be. We are also working on on all these different issues like future of our cities, future of green and so on. But nevertheless, the most important impact had been introduced now by sustainable finance in Brussels, where all the investors and all the capital has to be diverted in a certain direction where ecological and social investments are in the focus of these investors. And there is a level expert group implemented in Brussels since 2018, and we have a taxonomy to classify what is definitely the right investment. And therefore now we have all these climate protection aims, and this is something we all have to obey now.
Good. And I'm just wondering, just coming to you, Christiane, there are a lot of different, I mean, we had a session earlier on wellness as well, so there's well certification, there's LEED, is it time for some of these things to all come together to create something that actually helps? Because I agree about the valuers, for certainly that's an issue, because unless valuation values sustainable properties more highly because of the sustainability of the investment, it's far more difficult to get things moving. I mean, I think that's certainly the case. Do you think there is a place for benchmarking in terms to help drive this kind of valuation so that there's a consistency through the market? Or do you think that there needs to be a way of linking all of these things together?
I'm personally a fan of the competition between the different certification schemes, because Bärbel, what you just said, it's the remarkable thing about the ESG development is that it's just not only complying with regulation and with statutory requirements, but being better than the law. And this is being driven by the market. And to create something good in a wider sense. And I think the certification schemes have played a huge role to move to tell people in the market what sustainability is, to set up criteria which are being reviewed by an independent body, and in the end the certificate is being granted, and this confirms a certain standards. But it's only one point in time that they're reviewing the sustainability performance of a building, for example, when we have the new erect buildings, the developments, and they have the certificate for these buildings. It's only one point in time they look at. So I think we will see more and more in new schemes, and also regulation, setting up criteria for the sustainability performance and operations of buildings.
Okay, good. And you mentioned, Sara, just the importance there of benchmarking earlier, and you also mentioned that you've been at GRESB and also at Fitch Ratings. So how do you see this from that perspective, which I think is very interesting? How do you see how this could develop in terms of helping support the industry to support these goals better?
Yeah, I think we're living in a very interesting time where there's clearly no universal mandatory disclosure standard, let alone building certification scheme. In terms of sort of the broader disclosure topic, we are starting to see some convergence, especially around the TCFD, which is the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. The EU's guidelines on non-financial disclosures is aligning with that. The UNPRI is actually requiring signatories starting next year to disclose or report rather on some select TCFD indicators, and even GRESB has recently updated its resilience module to align with that. So there is some convergence happening. That said, we've seen this kind of transition, I would say, over the past few years from what we call green to ESG, and going from voluntary reporting to compliance, from green building certification or plaques to actual performance data. And going from, seeing sustainability as an opportunity to cut operating expenses to actual benefits in capital markets, which Christiane was talking about. So I think there's not one single standard. Obviously, regulation is now stepping in, and that may change going forward as we're all kind of pushing toward these global climate-related goals. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Measurabl is agnostic, I would say, in this sense, in that we really see ourselves as a technology tool, and that we're able to try and be that centralized place for you to collect all of your ESG information. So whether it's consumption data straight from the assets, building certifications, projects that are underway for retrofits, whatever that may be, it's a place to store it, it's a way for you to analyze it, and ultimately the decisions are up to you as investors and owners in terms of how you want to use that data and what you want to aim toward in terms of your own strategic goals.
And in terms of the investment side and setting yourself goals, Lars, as a business, how important, I suppose, is the data, the measurement, the benchmarking, but also setting targets for you in order to provide a guideline for what you want to achieve as a business?
Yeah, I think you can only be authentic if you have certain goals that are measurable. So I like so that means you can explain you want to do the world a better place, but if you don't have clear quantifying targets, it's hardly to verify for your investors, for your employees, for your stakeholders. So we have actually started, as said a year ago, how can we quantify which emissions we are producing in our portfolio. Together with Measurabl, we found a way where we can easily measure and report, because we will report every year how much we have reduced our, for instance, CO2 emissions in our portfolio that we manage for our clients. So sustainable, and I think regulation will kick in. And when this happens, that regulation gets tighter, and what you see, what is happening on the street, that will happen. And it will hit hard the real estate industry, obviously. Therefore, if you are not prepared, you will be a victim in the first place of regulation. And therefore, we already started, and I think it's very visible if you are saying as a company you want to reduce your CO2 emissions by 20%. If the whole industry would do that, I think we would be a step further.
And is it actively driving your investment? So you're only now investing in sustainable. I've suddenly become very loud. I'm not sure why, but that's sustainable. And what do we do about the standing assets? What are you doing about those? Because obviously, does that mean you're over time greening that portfolio?
Of course. You screen the whole portfolio, and then you see the assets in your portfolio which have so to say, the worst KPIs when it comes to waste production, CO2 emission, and then you start identifying exactly these assets, and given that it's incorporated in the work process as a whole asset management process, you start actively, simple things, how you say, if you in the waste production, that you really separate which you do. There are some assets, obviously, in this world where this is not happening. Or how can you improve your energy efficiency so over the years, the portfolio will get more green and green and green. I think it's not realistic to say that we are only investing now for our clients in pure green assets, but we will improve the quality from from an environmental dimension of the whole portfolio over years. And therefore, we have formulated and quantified our targets, that the whole world sees they do something on their portfolio.
Did you want to pick that up?
We've just carried out an investor survey in Germany and Switzerland, and it confirms what Lars has just said. So already 32% of the investors carry out an environmental due diligence or have an ESG checklist when looking at new properties they want to acquire. And of course, they will acquire the properties, but they will form a budget if the sustainability standard is not as good as they want to have it, and by that, the properties are getting virtually more and more expensive if they are not comply with the standards.
That we have to be realistic in a certain point, because the existing buildings, they need a lot of refurbishment, and some of them are in a situation where you won't be able to refurbish it from an economical point of view. So what is most important in the industry is that we will have some real guidelines and companies who are ahead of the curve, who will really lead the industry in the right direction. And that is, for example, Corestate. These are also some other big companies which I know best, and they develop their own strategies, and this will lead to a new era of investments. But it's a long way to go. We still have a lot of homework to do. The most important thing is that the leaders are aware of the situation. And then to finish, you have to measure what you do. If you can't measure it, you will not be able to manage it.
That's great, and I was keen to get from everybody actually what they saw as the next steps, and you've just given me yours, Bärbel, so that's great. Let's start with you, Sara. Just this is very quickly one each as the last kind of thing is what are the next steps for the industry and I guess your company in helping develop this?
So the next step that I see, Measurabl says it takes you from the meter to the market. And I think increasingly the market is not just the sales or acquisition market, transaction market, it's financial markets. So I think the next step is really seeing this evolution that's begun with green bonds and is now moving into green loans, sustainability-linked loans, where ESG data is being used by lenders, by financiers, incorporated into their underwriting for risk management purposes, but also to find opportunities like Lars was talking about. You know, what I get excited about is this transition to a low-carbon economy, I think can best be leveraged by identifying those underperforming or non-compliant properties. And then when you can connect that with the finance piece, I think real transformation can occur. So that's where I see the industry going, and that's also my role, which is no surprise, I guess, at Measurabl, is to really focus on increasing exposure to capital markets.
Great. Christiane.
Yeah, I also agree that legislation will kick in. So we can only recommend that the legislative and regulatory processes are being closely monitored, and also the agreements regarding the real estate needs to be reviewed, and if they ensure that all the ESG criteria which been agreed are properly implemented. And what we see, there are many regulatory gaps which need to be closed, and it's also important to draft all the agreements in a flexible way so that they're open to future developments. And last but not least, I think the most important statement, this is also confirmed in the Corestate sustainability report, is that investors need to have a life cycle view, that when it comes to ESG sustainability, so it's important not to look at one point in time, but be proactive and look at future development and implement them as early as possible.
Great. So Lars, last for you, next steps.
Now it comes to the proof of evidence of the concept, obviously. So that means we have now formulated our targets, and now we need to prove that we can also achieve it. What I would love to see what I would love to see is that the whole industry formulates KPIs like via the CR or companies like Measurabl, that they offer simply their services to many others in this industry, because I think Corestate obviously is an important player, but we are not the industry. So we can prove, we can formulate a benchmark KPIs, what we have done, but others have obviously to follow. And this will be a very exciting time now, the next 12, 24 months, because others need to follow, because as you said, clients simply demand. And if you want to do business, it's a prerequisite to get business from our trusted clients.
Great, thank you very much. Really great insights, I think, there into this. I think it is going to be a growing topic, significantly growing topic over the next years, because I think the whole climate change issue, but also, I agree with you, governance, the diversity, is all going to play a much, much stronger role. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for joining us here.